Welcome to Syntax. We got Ricky Hanlon on today. He is one of the core devs behind React, and we got him on today to talk about some of the new stuff in React, what's going on with it, some of like the more, I'm going to say like modern React, you know, we're going to be talking about transitions and view transitions, maybe some suspense, and hopefully some of the new performance stuff that they've been cooking on, the DevTools stuff he was showing me earlier. I'm not sure if he's going to show us that or not, but I'm pinning him to it right now. Some really cool stuff. So welcome, Ricky. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm real excited.
Yeah, and also I got to say, before we start getting into anything technical, I am going to say you're going to have to leave the show because you have a bunch of Ohio State stuff behind you. And I am wearing an Ann Arbor, Michigan t-shirt today. So unfortunately, we're sworn enemies just because of college football.
Yeah, well, we are the national champions, so...
Yeah. I should not have said anything, yes.
Yeah, especially this season.
Man, I went to a CFL game, like Canadian football game, this weekend, and like there was like 20,000 people there, and like I'm pretty sure the Americans' high school games have more people come to it. It was kind of sad.
Yeah.
Cool. Give us a rundown of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Ricky. I work on the core team on React. Basically just think about user interfaces all day and user experience. Right now I'm just planning for ReactConf, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. I have a talk that I'm planning that I'm really excited about, but a little nervous about. There's a lot going on that it's really hard to get the messaging right. So I've been talking, and a lot of the theme for that talk is going to be transitions and a lot of the like modern React features and what it looks like to build a modern React app. And so I've been doing talking a lot about transitions and seeing what people understand about them and don't understand about them, or how we can kind of clarify it. So that's kind of my main focus right now.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to talk about that as well, because I think like most people who use React, like you can make a component, you can throw some state in there, you could probably make a mess with a use effect, but there's this like whole, dare I say, like new or advanced API, which surrounds transitions, deferred, suspense, all of that stuff. So what I was hoping to do is like let's understand what those things are, and then maybe we'll get into some foot guns and performance and like possible issues that people listening might have and how we can solve them.
Yeah, for sure. Love to dive in.
And if you want to see all of the errors in your application, you'll want to check out Sentry at sentry.io/syntax. You don't want a production application out there that, well, you have no visibility into in case something is blowing up and you might not even know it. So head on over to sentry.io/syntax. Again, we've been using this tool for a long time and it totally rules. All right.
So give us your best explanation. I'm sure you live and breathe this all day. Is like, what's a transition in React?
Yeah, you can think of a transition as a UI transition. Fundamentally, it's kind of like, you can think of it as maybe a little bit like a transaction or like a background thread. So in native apps, you have a problem where you handle input events on the UI thread, and that can cause stuttering and laggy UI if you do everything on the main thread. So it's very common to offload expensive things to a background thread. In JavaScript, we don't have a background thread. Everything is main threaded. Yep. Right. And if you go back to, I was actually just watching the conference talk for ReactConf in 2017 when we first introduced Fiber. And that talk is really great because it talks about all of the problems for performance in apps and kind of walks you through the conclusion that the core concern for UI libraries for innovating in the future and being able to handle this problem is scheduling. Being able to schedule different types of work like transitioning, and transition being like navigation or updating state or data on the server and then navigating, or refreshing, pull to refresh, right? These are all scheduling problems. And so the fiber rewrite and all of the features that we've been working on with like the big scary concurrent mode name, the concurrent features are really just scheduling features. How can you prioritize user input and defer transitioning the result of that input to kind of like a background thread so that you can always handle user input as the highest priority?
Okay. And can you give us an example of what that might look like? To me, I'm just thinking in my head right now where you have an input box, and as the user is typing, you're doing some sort of work that could possibly block the main thread. And then it is kind of weird to type into. But can you give us maybe a better example than that?
Yeah, that's a good example. I think like historically we've given that example maybe too focused on that example because that example is generally explained as being like CPU bound, right? If you're like filtering a really large array, then as you're typing, you don't want the filtering the array or rendering the items to take too long. But if you think about like a type ahead, the primary way that people would do that is with a request, like an async request, right? And so how do you coordinate all of the different requests that you're going to be firing off on like each keystroke? So that you're not showing old results. One of the things that drives me nuts about UIs is when you like are typing in a search bar or a type ahead, and then just as you go to like click the result, it changes in the order, and you click the wrong one. Ideally, transitions can help you fix this because you'll be able to batch all of the requests and only update the results once. I think another great example is like if you have a table and you have different filters on the table. So one thing that's like very common to do, especially if you're syncing it to URL params, one of the things that's common to do is like you click a drop down, you click a filter, like filter out these items. And then one of two things could happen. If you're syncing it to the URL state synchronously, then you like click one of the items and then the drop down light closes with the old value, not the ones that you selected. And then there's some time, maybe a fetch or something, and then the results of the table update. So that's a bad experience. What you want is to immediately update that filter to show what the user clicked, like show feedback for the user interaction immediately. And then you can transition the results to the new results. It's kind of like a fundamental property of like UI design is that those results are going to take longer than rendering the like user feedback. We even have core web metrics for this with like INP. A lot of these metrics around that separate the difference between like showing user feedback and then seeing the result of that feedback. And users have different expectations for what those are, for how fast your site is perceived. If you click on something and nothing happens for 200 milliseconds, or in this example, like until the entire request comes back, which could take 500 or even a second to change, that's going to feel, it's going to be slow in that case, and it's also going to feel slow. You want to be able to have really quick user input, user feedback, and then transition to the result.
Okay. And how does deferred and suspense fit into these things, or how are they related to it?
useDeferredValue I think of as kind of like a way to defer at the read point instead of the write point, where a transition is like when you're at the write point, you're in the click handler, you know that you can defer this state update or defer this mutation. And most of the time that write point is happening either in your data fetching layer or in your router, right? You shouldn't need to, if you're using a suspense enabled router or data fetching, you shouldn't need to wrap your like router.navigate in start transition. Router.navigate should happen as a transition because router navigation events are always transitioning the UI. But a lot of times you'll be at the read point that you need to be able to defer part of the UI so it doesn't block user input. And that's when you would use like a useDeferredValue. And then Suspense has a lot of things to it. The thing that I really am trying to help people appreciate about Suspense right now is the batching behavior. So a lot of other frameworks that are out there say like have Suspense now, but I think they should have like, we have Suspense asterisk, which is like, we have a component that shows a loading state, but doesn't do everything that React Suspense does. So for example, we do a very controversial thing called throttling, which is if you are loading a page and we show a fallback, we make sure the fallback is shown for at least 300 milliseconds. Because if you just flicker the fallback in as soon as the data is ready, say in 10, 50, 100 milliseconds, it feels slower than waiting 300 milliseconds to the user because you didn't have a chance to see like the fallback content, right? All it looked like to you is just jank. And so we throttle, but the throttling gives us a lot of performance benefits. So for example, if you don't throttle and you're like doing something like reading layout in the DOM, well, then you're going to potentially have multiple updates, and that's multiple reads of the DOM and multiple layout computations. But if you were just to wait and batch everything and commit it all at once, then you'd only have one layout.
Oh, so that 300 milliseconds gives you 300 milliseconds to wait around and see if anybody else want to update state or whatever in here.
Yeah, and that's especially important when it comes to animations, because for animations you want to try to minimize the amount of fallbacks that you animate in, right? And so if you were to trigger an animation, let's say you have like 2 items in a feed and you are replacing those items with the content as fast as possible, and each one's triggering the animation. Well, if you're using document start view transition, you can only run one animation at a time. So that would result in like if you had 3 items, it would result in 3 sequential 200 millisecond animations, which takes 600 milliseconds total. But if you can wait and batch them into one, then you have a 300 millisecond fallback, and then you have one 200 millisecond animation, and you're only at 500 milliseconds. So it's 100 milliseconds faster to wait a little bit longer until you can animate everything.
And you're saying that adding 300 milliseconds feels faster than having no wait at all?
Not the no wait at all.
Showing the fallback, right?
It'd be a small amount of wait. Somewhere between, let's call it like 20 milliseconds and 300 milliseconds. Those just flicker. It's too fast for the user to perceive.
Okay. And where do you get this data from? Like, are there people at Meta that are researching this, and then they give you the scoop on what they found?
There are people at Meta, but there's people, there's like academic research in the UX and papers that you can look into and read up into, like perceived performance. Skeletons in particular are very well researched. And the research is basically like the faster you can show a skeleton, so there's no like delay from user input to skeleton. That matters a lot. The amount of time that you show a skeleton, like a suspense placeholder, doesn't matter as much up to a certain point of like 500 milliseconds, because the user is going to blame that on their network. They're not going to blame that on your app. If your app flickers, then that's a programming problem with the app. Like the user feels like the user is accustomed to being able to like wait for server data. So showing the fallback, there's a certain amount of tolerance for showing it.
Yeah.
So are these things that only very intense applications need to worry about? Like the average developer working on a React app, like how many of these features are they going to be working with on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think a lot of the talk that I'm going to be doing at React Conf is like, what I'm seeing a lot in the community is like a lot of product code that's like needs to wire up the transitions correctly and use useOptimistic correctly and use all these like new hooks in the product code, and you got to use it all correctly. But I think in the way that I do a bunch of side projects, and the way that I write my apps into side projects is that the product code just has like an event handler. And in that event handler, I'll just call like a navigation, or I'll add like a wait, save data to server, and then navigate. I don't write all of the like transitions and the modern features, and even like Suspense. Suspense is, behind some design component. I don't write all those features in the product code of the service itself. And so I think what I see shifting in like over the next few years is building these features in by default in 3 areas: the router, the data fetching layer, and the design components. And if you have them in those places, then you just get these experience for free by default. It's not extra work to have to add in a bunch of these features, just the way that it works. You're just able to take advantage of all these scheduling benefits and UX benefits without needing to do it all yourself.
Oh, right.
And you see this today, right? Even if you're just like writing a basic app, needing to like, first thing you'll hit is like, oh, I got to show a pending state. Okay, let me add use state is pending. And now let me make sure I reset that in the right places.
That's a pain in the butt. Yeah, you shouldn't have to do any of that. I like that a lot. Talk to us about useOptimistic as well. How does that fit into this?
Yeah, so useOptimistic, I think, is initially hard to wrap your head around. But I think it sounds more complicated than it is. useOptimistic is a hook that allows you to show some temporary state until the real state is available. And so the classic example, I think Instagram was one of the first apps that really like used optimistic state pretty heavily, like way back in the 2000s. And they would use it for like the like button. When you hit the like button, it would immediately show that it was liked. And then it would kick off a request in the background. Yeah. So it would feel really instant. You want to like hit the like button, see a pending smitter, or even worse, not even have a pending spinner. It just doesn't do anything until it like hits the server. And so useOptimistic is something similar. It's like it's part of that user feedback portion that I was talking about earlier, where you want to immediately show user feedback and then handle the result and transition to the UI to the result. And so actually for the use transition hook, the is pending flag in use transition is implemented as useOptimistic. So you can really don't even need the is pending flag from use transition. You can just use useOptimistic, although there are some benefits for error handling. Yeah, so useOptimistic, you think about it is like, if you think about it in terms of priorities, if you break down like the React scheduling into different priorities, where you have like the highest priority, which is like synchronous renders, and then you have the lower-ish priority of transitions, and then the lowest being like things that are off screen, like activity. Optimistic is part of that high priority. It's part of that user feedback first, and then once the transition finishes, then it's the transition value.
Okay. I want to go back to the thing you were saying about the 300 milliseconds. Basically the opposite of that. So in the very early days of React Suspense, there was an API that allowed you to pass like a minimum time before the suspended state would show, or before the fallback would show, right? That API was removed, and they said, yeah, you can, if you want to, like, basically it was like, I don't want to show a spinner if this is going to take less than 100 milliseconds. I'd rather show nothing. And then that was removed. Was that removed because of this 300 millisecond scheduling thing?
So that was added in the like experimental phase even before React 18, which is before I joined the team. So I don't have a ton of context, but which is kind of wild now. Like the before I joined the team is getting longer and longer ago. I think that the reason that we removed that was that it was too hard to do it correctly. Like tinkering with all those settings and getting it to like work correctly was difficult, and we replaced it with heuristics. So for example, if you want to hold back the transition until the content is ready, don't use a suspense boundary. If you transition to a part of the UI that doesn't suspend, then the transition will keep you on the previous page until the new page, all the data on the new page has loaded. But if you do specify a boundary, you're kind of saying like, this is not going to load fast enough. I need to like show something in its place. And that's where the user research comes in, where you want it to immediately show that fallback. Like it would be kind of like a perceived performance foot gun if you had that option and you were always setting it to 100 milliseconds, because you'd be showing this delay that the user would start to notice between like 100 and 300 milliseconds, where it's like, oh, I'm clicking, but it feels slow. It feels laggy. And the other thing is preloading. right? You can use preloading to warm the requests, and if you think they're going to happen fast enough, then you can preload them and then navigate to it, and then it wouldn't suspend.
Mm-hmm. Last thing I want to get you to explain is like how somebody should be fetching data in React. So if you need to obviously send off a fetch request or something that is a promise, like what's the blessed way? Is that the used way, and that fires off all these transitions for you?
Yeah, I'd say do what works for you. But if I was writing an app, I would use Suspense. I would use promise. Definitely preload the promise. So for example, if you're navigating on a click, then you want to start the request as soon as possible. Ideally, in a lot of cases, start prefetching in the hover event. So that if a hover event takes 100, 200 milliseconds between hover and mouse down, a lot of your API requests have already finished fetching by the time the user even presses down. So why wait until they like press down?
Yeah.
And then the next route like renders and then start fetching when you can just preload it.
One of my most popular YouTube videos was showing how McMaster Carr uses that one simple trick to make it seem faster, and everyone was like, and it's such a simple thing. Just fetch it on hover.
Yeah, I think that there are some struggles with like it's kind of hard today to like fetch with use because you have to use this like cached promise thing, and so if you don't do like preloading or use a data fetching library, like writing your own way to like suspend with use is kind of hard. It's been a hard problem for us to solve for years now. I think we're getting close with the cache API, but cache is hard, and cache invalidation is harder. And creating a generic API that anybody could use is like the hardest.
Yeah. We've seen Nextjs go through like 3 APIs on it already, and like cache ruin. I want to make a shirt that says "Cache ruins all my evenings" because it's just awful.
I have a question in regards to Next.js then. So is React now just Next.js, and does Vercel own and control React?
Get the spell guy out of here.
Just what people are saying. That's what they say on Twitter, right?
Well, first I'm going to get a shirt that says "Cache rules everything around me."
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
No, I hate that question. Thanks for asking it.
I love it. I knew you would. I'm sorry.
No, I think Dan said it best. Like we kind of still just work as the React team, and we build all of the features. The thing is, if you imagine what that would look like, of like, oh, they're taking it over and like they're built and they're making it for their own. Well, we wouldn't have just let everybody use all of the features that they can use. Like, server components would be completely locked down. We'd just build them. We could build all of these features only into Next. And we put so much work into like building them in the right way for anybody to be able to use that it's almost like, why do we go through all this work if it would have been way easier to do it like not the hard way?
They're almost pulling features out of Next to put them in React Core, right? Like data fetching and suspending and state management. Will React ever give us a signals-based state management or something like that? Have you guys talked about signals at all?
I don't know if it's going to be signals-based, but we did share in our labs post that we're starting to think of a concurrent store API. Right now, you can only use sync external store, which opts you out of transitions. It is a hard problem. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Like being able to sync something concurrently across multiple conceptual threads is difficult, but I think we'll be able to do it. I don't want to share too much because I don't want to. You share too much and then it changes. Like as an example. We were talking about the Suspense timeout option.
Yeah,
I have to talk about that thing all the time. And so I was saying that we're like 5 years from now, I'll have to be talking about this API that never shipped.
Right.
So we have to like balance that.
We need like a major warning, be like, this is just ideas. They're just thinking about it. Everyone says build in public, and as soon as you build in public, everyone gets pissed that you didn't actually ship your first idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a little bit of that is just that it's like kind of, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think it's like self-reinforcing. It's like because like we don't share a lot because if we share too early, then people create a lot of like in the information, like publish like courses or like here's this new thing coming to React and everybody needs to learn it. But even if it's just very like experimental and never ends up shipping. So we don't share a lot. But then that means that when we do share something, it does give that signal that this is coming. I think if we were to somehow be able to share like way more, then I think it would give it like it would kind of like combat that. But we're in this like vicious cycle of like not being able to share as much, not able to be able to build in public as much, which means when something is shared, it is a big deal.
Yeah. Do you think like in regards to, I know like the whole React server components like rollout, I think to some people in the community, it felt like it was taking a long time to get to like other platforms. I know that a lot of that is in like user library land and stuff. Were there like any lessons learned from that server components rollout, or was that how kind of you all expected it to go?
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of lessons learned. Server components kind of overlapped with a change that we made to build more in public. So before server components, if you think back to like hooks or any of the features before that, we would just like build it almost secretly, ship it at Meta, and get a bunch of feedback from Meta engineers, and nobody else outside would be able to use it. And then once we felt it was pretty good, we'd cut an RC, and then everybody would start like integrating with it. And that wasn't great because it was like we were only being able to kind of build to a small subset of the community. And so we changed to the canary process where we would kind of like do a lot like what browsers do with like TC39 standards, whereas something like progresses, it gets to a point where it's like ready for implementation. It's not in the standards yet, but it's ready for browsers to start implementing it and running origin trials and stuff like that. And so that's kind of like what our canary process is. I think that there was a lot of confusion because that was the first time we built something that way. It was like expected that like as we were sharing it, it was more like ready for like done. It's like, oh, it's done, and only Next has it. But it wasn't like done until React 19. It was stable and ready to use in production, and Next was able to ship on it. And one thing that people also forget when they talk about server components, because they're like, oh, they only built it with Next. That's not true. There was this, you ever heard of like Shopify Hydrogen? Hydrogen was built with server components. I don't remember the exact timing, but I think we built it in Hydrogen first. Or at least at the same time as Next. And they gave us a ton of feedback. They gave us feedback way back early in the day of the original server components, like naming didn't use directives. It used file extensions where you'd have like .client and .server. And when Hydrogen was shipping it and trying it, they gave feedback that it wasn't working, and like the shared component thing didn't really make sense. And that's when we went with the directives model instead. But they were directly, so we were trying, and they even had a Vite integration for Hydrogen. So there was Vite support for RSCs way back before
there was even a use server directive.
Yeah,
man. Yeah. Wow.
I think people don't have this context when they're thinking about this. And that's, I think, one of the learnings you were asking about learnings is just like, we were so heads down building, we didn't have a lot of time to like communicate or like message. And so we were kind of like heads down for multiple years. And so a lot of this messaging just in context just wasn't out there.
Yeah, that's gotta be tough, right? I mean, you're building something that just a tremendous amount of people are using, and
so many
like
people care and have opinions.
There's so many voices. Yeah, that's got to be really difficult to keep a handle on. Yeah, holy cow.
Yeah, but it's kind of, that's what you sign up for.
Yeah. Uncle Dan will keep them in check anyways, right?
Yeah. I've been trying to do a little bit of that too, pushing back against the FUD. I think Docs really help, but docs are really hard to write. Like writing a good doc. The only thing worse than no docs is bad docs. I'm not like, it takes me forever to write like good docs. I think it takes everybody forever to write good docs. So
Yeah.
especially if you're balancing like writing docs with like shipping more features, if the story isn't fully complete, a lot of the things that we were saying along the way was just like shipping solves problems. Like even for some of the valid criticisms, it would be like, yeah, the solution to that is not to tell everyone what we're going to do. It's to actually do it.
I like that. And the docs thing, going back to that, is it's even so much more important now that everybody's beep bopping in the AI text box and trying to kick out some more modern code. Like, have you guys talked about that at all as well with these new React APIs? Like, how do you get these huge LLMs to start kicking out more modern React code?
Yeah, one thing that's really nice about React is what tends to be easy for users to understand is easy, which is like more declarative type APIs, makes it easier for LLMs and AI to understand and generate. I just saw some tweets going around about like how to like seed your prompts with the you might not need an effect guide, which is like a good first step. But I think like, again, if you go down to into the future where like design components, routers, and data fetching library use these features out of the box, then you won't need to teach the AI how to do all of these things, just like you won't need to teach humans how to do all these things. Like the product code can just focus on, here's where the button is, inside of the button I want to navigate. And that's a very like declarative way to do it. If you think about like wiring up all the useOptimistics and all of the like start transitions and everything, that's kind of like making it imperative again.
Yeah, and it'll just handle it because I wrote it down here, router, data fetching, and design components layers know about those things, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully that's where the humans can still keep their jobs, as in those three layers.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm writing a whole bunch of mess of React so I can keep my job and fixing it. So that's good. All right. So demo time. Show us what you got here. This looks like I know that this demo itself was part of the React Labs blog post, but I know that there's a little bit more to it as well.
Yeah, so earlier I was going to talk about how like the core innovation for React, going back to like the fiber rewrite, was scheduling. So it's kind of like hard to understand and appreciate it just talking about it at a very high level. And so I think the best way to understand it is by like looking under the hood at what React is actually doing to see the difference of like before these scheduling concurrent features and after the concurrent features. Yeah, so I created a demo. I took it from the React Labs blog post that was showing animations and with view transition and activity. And I took a starting app which is just going to navigate back and forward from some different videos and allow you to like filter some videos. And I rewrote it, stripping out all of the new features. And just using like how you would basically write a React app in 2016. So you can see to fetch, we're fetching in an effect. We got to do all these like null checks. So this is not using suspense, not using transitions, not using anything. We go into the app, we can run a profile. And one of the new features we're going to be showing off at ReactConf are some of these new performance profiling tracks that show you what React is doing under the hood. And I think the best way to understand transitions and these scheduling features is to look at what React's doing under the hood. So starting pretty soon, when you run a profile, you're going to see these new React custom performance tracks. And you're able to see the scheduler and a component tree. So the scheduler has 4 different types of work, which is blocking, which is something to be like for user input, like sync updates, transition updates, suspense, and idle, which would be activity. I also added in some timings here for where my promises are waiting for data. Normally you'd see that in the like network timing, but since this app isn't really using a server, we have a separate track here for that. So if we zoom in to see how this like synchronous app is working, we can see we have this click event, and then in the blocking lane, we render some of the app, it commits, it fires the effects, and then in the effect is when we start the fetch. Nothing is kind of happening in the meantime until we finish fetching the video. And then after we fetch the video, we render the video info, which needs to fetch some more.
Oh, that's cool. And that's breaking it down into how long each component took to render as well?
Yeah. So this component took 1 millisecond. We have some coloring in the component tree here where if it takes like too long, I think if it takes over like 100 milliseconds or something, it turns red. And it's only the time that that particular component took to run. So you can also use that to find some performance issues. So fetch details takes even longer. And then after it finishes fetching, we have another, again, this is all happening in only the one blocking lane. We render again synchronously. And we can look at what's happening in the UI during this time. But you can see here at the beginning, there's this like white screen while this fetch is happening. There's nothing on screen. You probably couldn't see it when I did it. But now that you know it's there, you can't like
I caught it. Yeah, now I see it.
It's only 100 milliseconds, right? So it's fast, right? But
yeah,
it feels kind of slow. And then that does the first commit, and then there's the pending state that waits for the rest of the data. So during that network, you see the pending state, and then it pops in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's if you're how you do it if you just only have one priority. This is just, you only have one JavaScript thread, so you can't do anything in parallel. Let's see what this looks like if you're using all of the new features. So here, this is using use, it's using suspense, transitions, and let's see what this looks like if we run a profile now. Record, click on the video, stop.
Oh man, yeah, I can already see it.
So now we can see multiple timings here. So if we look at that fetch again, we're fetching in parallel. So we have our, like I was talking about earlier, is that inside of your click interaction, you want to show that synchronous state, right? So this is going to provide a little bit of feedback. And then you want to transition to the new UI. So as you're transitioning, you're loading the data, and those can happen in parallel to anything else that the user interacts with. We actually show you when view transition is animating. So here, as it starts to animate, you can see it's animating. And what this means is that during this animation, the fetch is in progress. If the fetch were to finish faster than this animation, then we could just start the other animation. One important note here is that because we have a fallback state, see how it's animating in the glimmer?
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. That can't really change in the middle of the animation just because of the way that the browser animation start view transition works. But that's okay. In this case, it takes longer anyway. So we're able to do that animation, and then it animates the fallback into, we have a even lower priority of the suspense fallback. So if you were to, for example, click back while that's loading in, that would be higher priority, and it would cancel that animation. One thing we can do here is reduce this fetch, because this is taking a full second to load. If I come in here and change this to, instead of a second, let's change this to 100 milliseconds. Now if we take a look at what's happening, blocking, transition, suspense. Now there's this really interesting waiting for previous animation. So you click, data from the first request comes back. So we can animate to the shared element transition, which I kind of skipped over, but that's a really cool animation. And then while that's in the middle of animating, so this is after 88 milliseconds, that's when our fetch came back for the next details. So while that's animating, React kind of like interrupts what it's doing and renders this content for the first video. And then the content is ready. Like Suspense is like, okay, I'm ready to replace the fallback with the content. React's would be like, oh, hold up. We are still running an animation, so let's wait until that finishes. And it waits, and then it animates right after the last animation. So you get this really smooth bump, bump.
Yeah.
Bump, bump. And this is, you really just have to have scheduling and priorities in order to do something like this. So another way to show this off is that we have an animation here when you type in some characters, right? It animates to the new position. What happens if I slow down this animation? Let's slow this down to 10%, and you'll be able to see it kind of slow down here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how am I able to hit like F and then delete and the animation cancels?
Yeah, because when you're in a view transition, it like locks up, right?
Right. Let me take a recording and we can see scheduling in practice.
This guy's a pro at DevTools. This is amazing.
I know.
Schooled here.
So this is our first key press. So we render the input field, and then we schedule the transition to change the order of the items. That commits and it starts animating. While it's animating, we get another keyboard event. And so we interrupt kind of conceptually the animation, and that triggers a new transition render. So that previous animation stops and we start a new one. And if we zoom in here, we can kind of see what happens. So you come in, and then we finally paint the FI as that animation is still animating. We paint the FI, we start another animation. So since we have different priorities, we're able to like interrupt the animation and start animating something else.
Oh, yeah.
Another way that you can see this is if I slow the animation down to 10% again, and I record an interaction. Let's say I click on a video. Oh, I changed my mind and go back. Well, see how the animation got canceled?
Mm-hmm.
We see that it starts to animate, and then the transition gets interrupted. And so we stop the animation and start animating again.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. And these dev tools are going to be, you're announcing it at ReactConf. Is it going to be available to the general public after that?
Yeah, we're going to release the DevTools. The plan is to release the DevTool performance tracks at ReactConf. Hopefully soon after folks are able to see this demo, they'll be able to install it and use it.
Cool. I got a couple more minutes left. I want to ask you one more thing about like new APIs coming forward, and that's the React Activity API. Can you explain what that's for and where that's at right now?
Yeah, so with Activity, it kind of gives you the ability to both pre-render content and keep content around in the background. And so if we use this app, there are a couple of, it works okay, but things that we can improve. So when I click on this video, we kind of see the fallback animate in, right? Mm-hmm. What do we want to pre-render all of these detail views so that all the data is available and we can animate right to the content? Well, we can do that with Activity. So here in Activity, we're, for all of the details, we render each page, and then only the active page do we set to visible. Otherwise, they're hidden. And when we play with the video now, you can see it animates directly to the content because they're pre-rendered. So all the data and DOM has been completely rendered and mounted, which will speed up, make our animations feel a lot more fluid. And if we look at the performance tracks again to see what's going on and how this works, well, now we have this work that's happening in the idle track.
Wow.
Which is where it's preparing all the like hidden activities.
Okay, and that's low priority, right? Like that's not going to get in the way of your critical UI, but should there be available resources for pre-rendering these types of things, that's what gets thrown in idle?
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Because what's nice about that is there's another, that's the pre-rendering, but there's another advantage to it here. Because let's say we come in here and we search for the 5th video, right? And then we click on 5th video, cool, and we go back. We've lost our search field state. I got to research for first video.
Yeah.
What you can do with activity is to keep the home view mounted while you're navigating to the next views. So I can go 5th video, go back, and I'm still on the 5th video.
Oh, yeah.
This is such a killer demo for me. That to me is such a killer user experience that it feels like it's too hard to do right now, right?
And maintaining, and people are probably screaming right now, like why don't I just use display none? You know, like what's the benefit of that? And the benefit here, I'm understanding, is that it will put those things, like it obviously keeps them around, but so does display none. But it also, the pre-rendering will put them in lower priority. Can't even speak.
Yeah, especially for the pre-rendering, like on initial mount or when you navigate and it starts firing off requests. I think if we record this initial page load, it'll be a little bit easier to see the benefit. You can kind of see that the visible content on the page that we render, which should be like our homepage view and the video view on this homepage, is not blocked by rendering each of the details pages. So if you were to interact or schedule any kind of transition or anything, it would stop working on this and start working on some stuff that's higher priority.
Wow.
Man, these are tough problems that I'm so thankful that I can just use the end results, right?
Especially a lot of these APIs will simply be like, we'll have to, I think like end users will have to know about them and know how to use them. But I think a lot of this like hard, heavy lifting will happen in, like you said, in a router. It's going to happen at framework level for a lot of this stuff. And we as a user will probably just be implementing it in like UI components. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's the dream.
That's good.
Yeah, it's you should be able to just tell your router which routes you want to prefetch, or like on hover you might start rendering something in a hidden activity and then reveal that activity when it comes, and then the router can just do all of that automatically for you. But I think this was a great demo because it kind of, one of the things that's interesting about this demo, a lot of people when they talk about transitions were like, oh, it's time slicing. It's like because React is slow for rendering, so they need to like split it up so that it still feels responsive. All of the rendering chunks that were happening in that demo were like like a couple milliseconds. The rendering itself is not the benefit. It's the priorities and the coordinating all of the async requests. And coordinating all of the animations. Those are like the benefits of all of the new features. And those benefits are something that you would want in any UI library that you're using. You want to do things like batch stuff so that it animates together. You want to do stuff like defer stuff in the background so that you can still fire off network requests and still keep the DOM around. But like if you're using signals, your signal updates don't need to go and immediately update all of the DOM for stuff that's not visible on screen. You want to defer those updates. And that's why we built all of these features. That's why we did Fiber. That's why I did concurrent features. Yeah. But it's been really hard to explain it. And I think that these new performance tracks really help to see the parallel in the priorities.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can talk till you're blue in the face to some of these people, and I think a lot of people will be like, I don't have those problems. But you can just simply hit the record button and show them that simple blank screen in between there, being like, you do have these problems. You might just not be as attentive to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and a lot of times people were not as engineers working on like a MacBook M4. we don't see those problems, especially developing on localhost. But the users are feeling them. And what we've tried to do with all of these features is think about them from the UX standpoint for all of the users of the app. So it just works and is coordinated the best way by default without flashing, minimizing jank, having really good INP without needing to write a bunch of extra code.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, anything else you want to talk to us about React before we wrap this up? Anything else we missed?
No, just watch my talk at ReactConf. I'm going to go into a lot more detail on this and kind of show what code will look like if you're using all the modern features that are built into these 3 areas for you.
Cool.
Nice.
Got tape on my shirt there. Last thing we have here is shameless plugs and sick pick and shameless plug. Taking a look at your background, I think you like stuff. A sick pick is something you pick that is sick, something that you love in your life. Could be a chocolate bar, could be a movie, could be an app, can be going for a walk in the park, anything that you appreciate. Football team that's better than wherever Scott's from. Michigan State, I was going to screw that up. Football.
Not Michigan State. You can't do that to me.
Yeah, my sick pick is going to be the new iPhone 17. It is my favorite iPhone so far. It's really feels.
Which
really
one did you
solid.
get?
A lot of people. I got the Pro, the 17 Pro, which is I think I'm seeing a lot of hate for, but I really appreciate like how nice it. I don't use a case, and for people that don't use cases, it feels like very solid. It doesn't feel like very delicate. Although, it's made of aluminum now, so it's more delicate. Check back in like a week after I've scuffed it up.
Let me tell you, I was a no case for two full years, and I just got this big old crack on it the other day, so I had to throw a case on here, sadly. But I'm a no case person too. I greatly prefer it.
My last phone was actually the same way, as I had cracked the back of it, so I had a case for the last couple of months.
Right, yeah.
I've had my 17 Pro Max for like 3 days now, and I already got I put a screen protector on it right away, and one of my kids was doing something with it, and it already chipped the screen protector. I can't get a video of it, but I saw that after he dropped it, and I was like, and I got a huge case on it, screen protector, but luckily it wasn't the actual screen itself, so I simply cannot. I would love to go just raw dog it, but I simply cannot.
And what was the other one? The sick pick and the
shameless plug. What would you like to plug to our audience? Where can they find you online? What's your blue sky, et cetera, et cetera?
Shameless plug is ReactConf. It's in a couple of weeks. Tune in online. It's live streamed for free. I'll be there. A lot of people will be there. And you can find me at Ricky FM on Blue Sky.
Sick.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was enlightening, and I'm really excited to play with all these new features.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ricky.
Peace.